down this tree, please. It's all I have left of my mommy.
It's only an old tree. She's just a child. She doesn't understand.
Tell me why.
The first swing of the axe never came. Instead, the entire village froze at the sound of a little girl's desperate cry. "Please, don't cut down that tree." Every head turned toward the old oak, standing in the middle of Willow Creek's common field. A tiny girl no older than 7 ran across the grass as fast as her little legs could carry her. Before anyone could stop her, she threw herself beneath the spreading branches, dropped to both knees, and wrapped her trembling arms around the rough trunk. Tears streamed down her dirt-smudged cheeks as she looked up at the farmer, standing only a few feet away. "Please," she whispered through sobs, "don't let them cut it down." The crowd fell silent for only a moment. Then laughter spread through the villagers. "It's just a tree. Someone get the child home. Poor thing still hasn't gotten over her mother." Several adults shook their heads while others whispered to one another, convinced the little girl was simply frightened by the sound of an axe. Only one man wasn't laughing. 45-year-old Jacob Carter stood motionless, the heavy axe resting harmlessly against the grass. He had spent nearly 3 decades working the land around Willow Creek and had cut down hundreds of trees, but never with a crying child standing beneath one. Jacob wasn't a cruel man. The village council had hired him to remove the old oak because its roots had begun lifting the road. Wagons struggled to pass, and the council planned to widen the path before winter. To everyone else, it was a practical decision. To the little girl, it looked like the end of the world. Jacob slowly knelt until he was at eye level with her. "Easy now," he said gently. "Nobody's going to hurt you." The little girl shook her head violently. "They'll hurt her." Jacob frowned. "The tree." She nodded without taking her arms away. "You don't understand." One of the council members sighed impatiently. "Jacob, we've wasted enough time." Another villager added, "Her grandmother has spoiled that child ever since her mother passed." The little girl didn't even look at them. Her eyes never left Jacob's. "They promised," she whispered. Jacob blinked. "Who promised?" "My mommy." A strange silence settled over the field. The breeze carried the smell of fresh grass through the village as the oak's leaves rustled softly overhead. Jacob had heard about Emma Harper. Everyone had. Her mother, Sarah, had died 3 years earlier after a long illness. Since then, Emma had lived with her elderly grandmother on the edge of town. People often saw the little girl sitting beneath this very tree, talking, reading, sometimes simply watching the wind move through its branches. Most assumed she was remembering her mother. Nobody had ever asked why she always came back to the same place. Jacob spoke softly. "Emma, can you tell me why this tree is so important?" She lowered her head. For several long seconds, only the birds answered. Finally, she whispered so quietly that Jacob almost didn't hear her. "My mommy is still here." The villagers exchanged uneasy glances. Someone muttered, "The poor child." Another woman wiped away a tear before quietly leading her own children farther back. Jacob looked at Emma again. She wasn't imagining things. She wasn't shouting. She truly believed every word she had spoken. He stood slowly and rested the axe against his shoulder. The council leader crossed his arms. Well, Jacob didn't answer immediately. Instead, he looked up into the branches of the old oak. It was healthy, strong, beautiful, far too healthy for a tree that everyone claimed should have been removed years ago. Something felt wrong, not dangerous, just unfinished. Jacob turned back toward Emma. When was the last time someone asked you why you come here? Emma looked surprised. No one ever has. The answer struck him harder than any axe ever could. All these years, everyone had told the little girl to leave the tree. Nobody had stopped to ask why she stayed. Jacob picked up the axe. Several villagers smiled, believing the work was finally about to begin. Instead, he walked past the trunk, past the roots, and drove the blade deep into an old tree stumped several yards away. The sharp crack echoed across the field. I'm not cutting this tree today. The council erupted into angry voices. You can't be serious. We hired you. The road has to be finished before winter. Jacob calmly folded his arms. Then it can wait one more day. Emma slowly stood, tears still shining in her eyes. For the first time since she had arrived, she smiled. It was small, fragile, but full of hope. Jacob looked back at the tree once more. Something about Emma's words refused to leave his mind. My mommy is still here. He didn't know what she meant. But before he swung another axe, he intended to find out. As the villagers slowly drifted away, one elderly woman remained standing beneath the edge of the field. Her face had turned pale. She stared at the old oak, then at Emma, before quietly whispering to herself. She remembered. Jacob heard the words. When he looked back toward the woman, she was already walking away. Jacob Carter barely slept that night. Long after the village lights disappeared and the wind settled across Willow Creek, one sentence refused to leave his mind. My mommy is still here. He had heard children say strange things after losing someone they loved. But Emma's voice hadn't sounded confused. It had sounded certain, as though she wasn't asking anyone to believe her. She simply knew. The next morning, before the sun had fully risen, Jacob saddled his old horse and rode back to the oak tree. The village square was empty, except for one small figure. Emma. She was already there, sitting quietly beneath the branches, with a worn blanket folded beside her. She wasn't crying anymore. She simply smiled when she saw Jacob. I knew you'd come back. Jacob climbed down from his horse. What makes you so sure? My mommy said kind people always come back. The words made him pause. He sat on the grass several feet away. Neither of them spoke for nearly a minute. The morning birds filled the silence. Finally, Jacob asked, Can I ask you something? Emma nodded. When did your mother tell you never to leave this tree? Emma looked up into the branches. The day before she went away. You mean the day before she died? Jacob's heart tightened. Did she tell you why? Emma slowly shook her head. No. She only hugged me. Tears filled her eyes again. She said. Emma took a deep breath. No matter what anyone says, never let them cut down our tree. Jacob frowned. Our tree. Emma nodded. She planted it. That surprised him. The oak was enormous. At least 30 years old. Much older than Emma. Jacob smiled gently. Are you sure? Emma looked almost offended. My mommy told me. And mommy never lied. Later that morning, Jacob visited the oldest resident in Willow Creek. 82-year-old Martha Collins had lived in the village longer than anyone else. If anyone knew the truth, it would be her. Martha welcomed Jacob inside with hot coffee. You've come about the tree. Jacob looked surprised. How did you know? The old woman smiled sadly. Because I saw Emma yesterday. She stared quietly through the window for several moments. I wondered how long it would take. Jacob leaned forward. Martha, what aren't people telling me? The old woman sighed. We all made a promise. A promise. To Sarah, Emma's mother. Jacob listened carefully. Years ago, Sarah asked every one of us to protect that tree. She never explained why. We thought she was being sentimental. What happened? Martha lowered her eyes. After Sarah died, life became busy. The promise slowly faded. She looked ashamed. Until yesterday. Jacob remembered the old woman's pale face in the crowd. You remembered? She nodded. And I realized. We all failed her. Jacob left Martha's house with more questions than answers. Why would a dying mother make an entire village promise to protect one tree? Why never explain? And why had nobody spoken about it for 3 years? Nothing made sense. That afternoon, the village council gathered again. We're wasting valuable time, one member complained. The road has to be finished. Another agreed. If Jacob won't do it, we'll hire someone else. Jacob stepped forward. Before anyone touches that tree, I want one day. The mayor frowned. For what? To understand why Sarah wanted it protected. The council members exchanged impatient looks. One laughed. You're taking advice from a 7-year-old. Jacob answered calmly. No. I'm honoring the last request of a dying mother. The room fell silent. Finally, the mayor sighed. You have until tomorrow evening. After that, the tree comes down. Jacob walked straight back to the oak. Emma was drawing little flowers in the dirt with a stick. She looked up as he approached. They're going to cut it tomorrow. She already knew. Jacob nodded. I'm trying to stop them. She smiled sadly. I know. He sat beside her. Emma, if your mommy left something here, anything, what would it be? Emma thought for a long time, then quietly answered, a treasure. Jacob almost laughed. A treasure. She nodded seriously. But not gold. My mommy said. The most important things people leave behind can't be spent. Jacob stared at the tree. The breeze gently shook the leaves overhead. Then, something caught his eye. Carved into the bark, almost hidden beneath years of growth, were two tiny letters. S.H. Sarah Harper. Jacob slowly reached out and brushed away the moss surrounding the carving. Below it, almost invisible, was another mark. A small arrow, pointing downward. His heartbeat quickened. He followed the direction of the carving to one of the thick roots. The soil there looked different, as though someone had once disturbed it. Emma watched him carefully. What is it? Jacob knelt beside the roots. Without answering, he gently brushed away a layer of leaves with his hands. The ground felt softer than the rest. Much softer. He stood immediately. I'll be back. Emma looked frightened. You're not leaving. No. I'm bringing a shovel. For the first time. Emma's eyes grew wide. Almost frightened. She grabbed his sleeve. No. Jacob stopped. What's wrong? Emma looked at the ground beneath the tree, then whispered something that sent a chill through him. Mommy told me no one must dig there until someone with a good heart finds the tree. Jacob slowly looked back at the carved arrow, then at the loose soil beneath the roots. Whatever Sarah Harper had hidden, she had expected someone to find it. The question was, why had she been waiting for Jacob? Jacob returned just before sunrise carrying only a small shovel and a lantern. He had intentionally come before the villagers woke. If Emma was right, whatever lay beneath the old oak deserved to be found in peace, not in front of a crowd eager for gossip. The morning air was cool, and a blanket of mist rested over the fields. Emma was already sitting beneath the tree, gently brushing fallen leaves away from its roots as if greeting an old friend. When she saw Jacob, she smiled, but there was worry in her eyes. You came back, she whispered. Jacob nodded. I gave you my word. Emma looked at the shovel in his hand, then back at the tree. Mommy said only someone with a kind heart should find it. Jacob wasn't sure whether he deserved those words, but he knew one thing: he couldn't ignore them anymore. Carefully, he knelt beside the carved arrow hidden beneath the bark. Instead of digging immediately, he first cleared away the thick layer of leaves and loose soil with his hands. Something felt unusual. The earth beneath one large root was softer than the surrounding ground, almost as if it had been touched years ago and carefully covered again. He drove the shovel into the soil with slow, gentle movements, taking care not to damage the roots. Emma watched every motion in complete silence, clutching the little ribbon her mother had once tied around her wrist. After only a few minutes, the shovel struck something solid. Thunk. Jacob froze. It wasn't stone. It sounded like wood. Emma's eyes grew wide. You found it. Jacob carefully brushed away more dirt until the corner of a small, weathered wooden chest appeared beneath the roots. It wasn't large, about the size of a family Bible, but it had been wrapped in oilcloth that had protected it from moisture all these years. His heartbeat quickened. He had expected old farming tools, perhaps forgotten belongings. Not this. Before he could lift it out, hurried footsteps echoed across the field. Jacob! The village council had arrived. Word had spread faster than he imagined. Within minutes, nearly half the village surrounded the oak tree. Some laughed, convinced the farmer had been fooled by a grieving child. Others watched in silence. The mayor folded his arms. "Have you finished this nonsense?" he asked. "The road can't wait forever." Jacob didn't answer. Instead, he gently lifted the small chest from the earth. The laughter stopped. No one had expected him to actually find something. An elderly woman stepped forward. Martha Collins. The moment she saw the old wooden box, tears filled her eyes. "I remember that box," she whispered. Everyone turned toward her. It belonged to Sarah. A murmur spread through the crowd. "You knew?" someone asked. Martha nodded slowly. "The night before Sarah passed away, she asked me to help her bury it beneath this tree." The villagers stared at one another in stunned silence. "Why didn't you tell anyone?" the mayor asked. "Because she made me promise." Jacob looked at Martha. "What did she say?" The old woman wiped a tear from her cheek. "She told me, one day someone kind enough to stop and listen to Emma will find it. Until then, let the tree keep its secret." Emma quietly lowered her head. "My mommy knew." Jacob carefully placed the chest on the grass. Its old brass lock had rusted almost completely away. Everyone leaned closer. Even the villagers who had laughed moments earlier now watched without saying a word. Jacob rested his hand on the lid. He hesitated. Emma reached over and gently touched his sleeve. "My mommy said, don't open it until everyone is quiet." The entire field fell silent. Even the birds seemed to stop singing. Jacob slowly lifted the lid. Inside lay several carefully wrapped items. A faded blue ribbon. A tiny pair of baby shoes. A leather-bound journal. A silver locket. And resting neatly on top, a sealed envelope. Across the front, written in elegant handwriting, were just 6 words. "To the person who finds this." Jacob looked at Emma, then back at the letter, with dozens of villagers holding their breath around him. He carefully broke the seal. Jacob unfolded the yellowed letter with trembling hands. The paper was brittle from the passing years, yet the handwriting remained neat and unmistakably graceful. Every villager leaned forward, waiting to hear what Sarah Harper had left behind. Emma quietly stepped beside Jacob, clutching the edge of his sleeve. She had dreamed about this moment ever since her mother whispered those final words beside the old oak tree. Jacob cleared his throat and began to read. "If you're reading this, then someone finally stopped long enough to listen to my little girl. If that person is you, thank you. I don't know your name, and we may never have met, but I already know something about your heart. You chose kindness before convenience." A deep silence settled across the field. Jacob continued. This tree is not important because it hides money or treasure. It is important because it holds memories. The day Emma was born, I planted this tiny oak beside our home. I wanted her to grow up with something that would always stand beside her, even after I no longer could. Emma lowered her head, tears slipping quietly onto the grass. Every birthday, we measured Emma against this tree. Every Christmas, we tied ribbons around its branches. Every spring, we buried little notes beneath its roots about our happiest memories. One day, I knew sickness would take me away. I couldn't stop that, but I could leave Emma one place where she would never feel completely alone. Several villagers quietly wiped tears from their eyes. Jacob opened the journal next. Inside were dozens of handwritten pages. Every year of Emma's childhood had been carefully recorded. The first time she walked, the first flower she picked, the first word she spoke, the first bird she rescued after it fell from its nest. Each memory ended with the same sentence. Tomorrow we'll visit our tree. Jacob smiled through tears. Then another folded page slipped from between the journal's pages. It wasn't written to a stranger. It was addressed directly to Emma. Jacob looked down at the little girl. Would you like me to read it? Emma nodded. His voice became softer. My precious Emma, if you're reading this, then you've grown much stronger than I ever had the chance to see. I know there will be days when you'll miss me so much your heart feels too heavy to carry. When that happens, come sit beneath our tree. Listen to the wind. The wind won't be my voice. But I hope it reminds you of my hugs. Watch the leaves dance. They won't be my hands. But I hope they remind you that life keeps moving even after goodbye. And if one day people forget why this tree matters, don't be angry with them. Simply remind them that love leaves roots they cannot always see. By the time Jacob finished reading, almost no one in the crowd could hold back their tears. Even the council members, who had demanded the tree be cut down, stood with lowered heads. Emma looked toward the old oak and whispered, I kept my promise, Mommy. Just then, the mayor slowly stepped forward. For a long moment, he stared at the tree. Then he quietly removed his hat. I was wrong. He turned toward the villagers. So were we. No one argued. The laughter from the day before felt impossible now. One elderly man stepped closer. I remember helping Sarah carry buckets of water when she planted this tree. Another woman smiled sadly. I stitched the blue ribbon that's inside the box. One by one, forgotten memories began returning. The tree had never been just another oak. It had quietly become part of everyone's lives. Then the village engineer cleared his throat. There is another way. Everyone looked toward him. We don't have to remove the tree. He unfolded the road plans. If we shift the new road 20 feet to the east. He paused. The oak can stay. The crowd looked at the drawing. It would cost more. It would take longer. But it could be done. The mayor smiled. I think. He looked at Emma. It's worth every penny. The villagers nodded in agreement. Emma hugged Jacob tightly without saying a word. As everyone began discussing the new plans, Jacob glanced back at the memory box one last time. Tucked beneath the journal where no one had noticed before, was one final folded envelope. Unlike the others, it had never been opened. Across the front were just 4 handwritten words. Open this next spring. Jacob looked at Emma in surprise. She looked just as confused. Neither of them knew. Sarah Harper still had one final surprise waiting for them. No one spoke as Jacob carefully folded the final unopened envelope back into the memory box. Across the front, Sarah's elegant handwriting read, "Open this next spring." The mayor looked puzzled. Why wait? Jacob smiled faintly. Because if Sarah wanted it opened today, she would have written today. Emma gently took the envelope into her tiny hands. I promised Mommy I'd always listen. Jacob nodded. Then we'll wait. For the first time in years, the old oak wasn't surrounded by arguments. It was surrounded by respect. Over the next several weeks, Willow Creek slowly began to change. The road plans were redrawn. Instead of cutting through the oak's roots, the new road curved gently around the tree. Some people complained about the extra work. But every complaint disappeared when Emma quietly carried fresh flowers to the tree each morning. Soon, other children began leaving flowers too. Then ribbons. Then handwritten notes. Without anyone planning it. The old oak became the heart of the village. Jacob found himself visiting almost every evening. Sometimes Emma talked. Sometimes they simply watched the sunset together. One evening she asked, "Do grown-ups forget promises?" Jacob thought carefully before answering. Sometimes. Why? Because life gets busy. Emma looked at the tree. I don't want to forget Mommy. Jacob smiled. I don't think you ever will. She looked up at him. What if someday I can't remember her voice? Jacob was quiet for a long moment. Then he answered softly. You won't remember every word, but you'll remember how she made you feel. Emma smiled. I like that. Winter slowly faded. The last patches of snow disappeared beneath warm spring sunshine. Tiny green buds appeared on the old oak's branches. Emma noticed them first. Mommy said spring is when everything gets another chance. Jacob looked toward the unopened envelope. It's spring. Emma nodded. I think it's time. Word spread through Willow Creek. By sunset, nearly, the entire village had gathered beneath the oak once again. Only this time, no one came to watch a tree fall. They came to remember. The mayor removed his hat. Martha stood quietly beside Emma. Jacob carefully opened the final envelope. Inside was one folded sheet of paper and a tiny cloth pouch. Emma looked confused. Jacob unfolded the letter. Sarah's handwriting seemed almost alive. If you've waited until spring, then you've already honored my greatest wish. Jacob continued reading. Emma, if you're holding this letter, then you kept your promise longer than I ever expected. I am so proud of you. Emma quietly wiped away another tear. Inside the small pouch are acorns from the very tree your grandfather planted when I was a little girl." Jacob opened the pouch. 5 perfect acorns rolled gently into his hand. A soft murmur spread through the crowd. Sarah's letter continued. "Trees aren't important because they live forever. They're important because they help new life begin. Please don't let my story end beneath this oak. Plant these somewhere children can laugh. Plant them where families gather. Plant them where kindness continues to grow. Because love is never meant to stay in one place." By now, almost everyone in the village was crying. Jacob slowly lowered the letter. The little girl looked at the 5 acorns resting in his hand. "Can we plant them together?" Jacob smiled. "I'd be honored." The villagers stepped forward one by one. No one had to ask. Every family wanted to help. The mayor quietly spoke. "I think Willow Creek owes Sarah more than an apology." He looked toward the open field. "We'll plant all 5. The crowd nodded. But just as everyone began walking toward the meadow, Jacob noticed something carved into the inside lid of the old memory box. Something no one had seen before. Only 4 simple words. "Kindness always grows back." He smiled. Perhaps that had been Sarah's greatest treasure all along. The first acorn was planted by Emma. She knelt beside the fresh patch of earth, dug a tiny hole with her own hands, and carefully placed the little seed inside. Jacob handed her the shovel. "Would you like to cover it?" Emma smiled through tears. Together, they gently pushed the soil back into place. One by one, every family in Willow Creek helped plant the remaining 4 acorns around the village, one near the schoolhouse, one beside the church, one along the river where children often played, and one near the entrance to the town so every traveler would see it before arriving. No one called them ordinary trees anymore. People simply called them Sarah's promises. Months passed, then years. The little oak in the center of the village remained untouched, growing stronger with every season. Children played beneath its branches after school. Young couples sat beneath it on summer evenings. Families gathered there every spring to remember those they loved. Without realizing it, the villagers had done exactly what Sarah had hoped. Her love had spread far beyond one tree. Emma grew older. The frightened little girl who had once cried beneath the oak slowly became one of the kindest young women in Willow Creek. Whenever a traveler arrived hungry, Emma offered food. Whenever a child cried, Emma sat beside them until they smiled again. People often asked why she cared so deeply about strangers. She always answered the same way. "My mommy taught me," even though most of those lessons had come from a letter. Jacob never married. People often wondered why. He simply smiled. "My family found me when I wasn't looking." To him, Emma had become the daughter he never knew he needed. He taught her how to mend fences, plant wheat, care for horses, and recognize storms by watching the clouds. Emma taught him something far greater. That kindness often begins by stopping long enough to listen. One warm spring afternoon, nearly 15 years after the day beneath the oak, Willow Creek celebrated its annual Founders Festival. The village square overflowed with laughter. Children raced beneath the branches of the now enormous oak tree. Nearby stood a simple wooden bench. Carved into its back were the words, "Love leaves roots that time cannot erase." Visitors stopped to read it every day. Many asked about its meaning. The villagers never rushed the story. They always began the same way. It all started when a little girl begged a farmer not to cut down a tree. As the festival came to an end, Emma quietly slipped away from the crowd. Jacob noticed, just as he had done for years. He followed. She walked to the old oak, placed fresh wildflowers at its base, then sat beneath its branches. Jacob joined her. For several minutes, neither of them spoke. The wind gently rustled through the leaves. Finally, Emma smiled. "You know, I don't come here because I think Mommy is inside the tree." Jacob looked at her. "I figured that." Emma laughed softly. "I come because this is where I remember loving her, instead of losing her." Jacob felt his eyes fill with tears. That single sentence carried more wisdom than many people found in an entire lifetime. He gently placed his hand over hers. "I think she'd be proud of the woman you've become." Emma looked toward the sky. "I hope so." Jacob smiled. "I don't." She looked at him, puzzled. "I know so." As the evening sun dipped below the hills, the laughter of children echoed beneath the spreading branches. One little boy pointed toward the tree and asked his grandmother, "Why didn't they cut it down?" The elderly woman smiled. "Because one little girl reminded an entire village that some things are worth more than convenience." The boy thought about that for a moment, then ran off to join the others. Jacob watched him disappear into the golden light. He realized Sarah had been right all along. The greatest inheritance wasn't money, or land, or possessions. It was kindness passed from one heart to another. The camera would slowly rise above the village. 6 healthy oak trees stood proudly across Willow Creek, their leaves dancing together in the evening breeze. The original oak remained at the center, not because its roots were impossible to remove, but because one little girl's love had given an entire village new roots of its own. And sometimes, the strongest things we leave behind aren't buildings or fortunes. They're the people whose lives continue to grow because we chose kindness when it mattered most.